Imagine this. You hold something in your hand so precious that losing it would tear a hole straight through your soul. It could be the woman whose laughter feels like home, the child who trusts you without question, or the dream you built from nothing. You've fought for it, sacrificed for it, sworn silently to protect it. And then you feel it, that slow, almost imperceptible urge to push it away, to test it, to wound it, sometimes in small, cutting ways, sometimes with the violence of total ruin. You can't explain why. To the outside world, it looks like madness. To you, it feels like gravity. Dostoyevsky understood this sickness well. His characters, tormented lovers, desperate gamblers, conflicted idealists, were haunted by the same question. Why do we destroy what we claim to love? Is it fear of losing it first? A twisted proof of our own power? Or some deeper, darker compulsion embedded in the human soul? Maybe it's because love strips us bare, and we would rather scorch the earth than be seen in our raw, trembling truth. Maybe the closer we get to what we want most, the more terrified we become of being unworthy of it. But if that's true, if destruction is the shadow twin of love, then what does that mean for every relationship, every dream, every fragile thing we've ever dared to hold? The answer lies buried in the human psyche, in places we rarely dare to look, and that's where we must go next. To understand why men destroy what they love, you must walk into the dim corridors of the human mind, the kind Dostoyevsky mapped in ink and anguish. He knew that love, in its purest form, is not a gentle meadow bathed in light. It is a battlefield. It threatens the ego more than hate ever could, because love demands surrender. Carl Jung would call this the confrontation with the shadow, the part of the psyche where all the traits we reject, deny, or fear about ourselves are buried. Love drags that shadow into the open. Suddenly, the man who sees himself as strong must face his neediness. The man who prides himself on control must face his helpless longing. In this exposure, something primitive stirs, a survival instinct that whispers, "Destroy it before it destroys you." Nietzsche might frame it differently. He saw in human beings a restless will to power, a desire not merely to exist, but to dominate, shape, and impose. Love, true love, defies that instinct. It cannot be possessed like property. It is an equal exchange, or it is nothing. Schopenhauer, the grim realist, believed that desire itself is suffering. To desire is to be perpetually restless, unsatisfied. Some men, sensing this inevitability, would rather burn the thing they love than watch it wither into routine. Destruction becomes a final, intoxicating burst of intensity. But the roots stretch further still, tangled in the soil of societal conditioning. Men are told from an early age that vulnerability is weakness, that emotions should be subdued or weaponized, never lived in. To love deeply is to stand naked before another soul, and for many, that nakedness feels like standing on a cliff with no railing. There is also the strange phenomenon of self-sabotage, a term modern psychology has given to what Dostoyevsky painted in characters like Raskolnikov or Stavrogin, men who at the peak of potential happiness choose ruin. Jean-Paul Sartre would remind us that with love comes freedom, and with freedom, the crushing weight of responsibility. To truly love is to choose again and again without guarantee. That uncertainty can be intolerable to the mind that craves permanence. The paradox is cruel. The more you long for love to last, the more its fragility gnaws at you. And yet, beneath these layers of philosophy and psychology, there is something even darker, an unconscious belief that one is unworthy of love in the first place. For men who carry this wound, every moment of happiness feels like borrowed time. The subconscious decides it is better to shatter the glass before someone else does. This is the hidden problem. Love is not destroyed because it is weak, but because it is too strong. It threatens the scaffolding of identity, the illusions of control, and the protective walls built over years of silent pain. Men do not always destroy what they love out of cruelty. Often, It is because they cannot yet bear the truth that love reveals about who they are. And this truth does not stay buried. Left unexamined, it begins to erode the foundation of a man's life, leading to consequences he cannot see until they have already claimed everything. When a man destroys what he loves, the damage rarely ends with the act itself. Like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples spread far beyond the point of impact, sometimes for years, sometimes for a lifetime. At first, he might tell himself it was necessary, even noble. He'll invent narratives to make the destruction easier to bear. It wouldn't have lasted anyway. She deserved better than me. I needed to protect her from myself. These justifications feel like armor, but they are made of paper. Beneath them, something begins to rot. Neuroscience tells us that the human brain is wired to seek coherence between action and identity. When your actions betray your deepest values, the mind is forced to choose. Change the behavior, or change the story you tell yourself about who you are. For many men, admitting the truth that they acted out of fear, pride, or unworthiness is too unbearable. So they rewrite themselves as the villain or the victim, identities that seem easier to carry than the unbearable weight of honest accountability. And here's where the trap tightens. Once you've labeled yourself as the man who destroys, the pattern becomes self-reinforcing. The next time love approaches, your mind recalls the last disaster and whispers, "You'll only ruin it again." That whisper becomes prophecy. On a personal level, this pattern breeds isolation. Friends drift away, sensing the unspoken instability. Family relationships fray, not from outright conflict, but from the quiet erosion of trust. Most devastating of all, self-trust dissolves. If you can't trust yourself not to wreck the things you value most, how can you trust yourself with anything at all? Societally, the impact is no less profound. Cultures are made of relationships, and when men, often conditioned to lead or protect, become repeat destroyers, the social fabric weakens. Children grow up in fractured homes, learning that love is something fleeting, fragile, and dangerous. Partners, once wounded, carry those scars into new connections, unconsciously transferring the cycle. The destruction of love is never a solitary event. It's a generational contagion. There is also a subtler consequence, one Dostoyevsky captured in his portrayal of guilt. Unlike regret, guilt does not fade simply with time. It lurks in the body, in the way a man breathes when he hears her name, in the way his chest tightens at certain songs or places. Psychologists have found that unresolved guilt can physically alter stress responses, keeping the body locked in a state of hypervigilance. This means that even long after the act, the destroyer is never truly at peace. Cognitive biases deepen the wound. Loss aversion, the tendency to fear losing more than we value gaining, keeps the mind replaying what was lost instead of building something new. Confirmation bias ensures that every failure afterward feels like proof of one's inherent destructiveness. Slowly, the man becomes a prisoner to his own narrative, a self-fulfilling prophecy that feels less like choice and more like destiny. And yet, perhaps the most insidious consequence is that destruction becomes comfortable. If you have lived in the ruins long enough, the ruins begin to feel like home. Beauty becomes unbearable because it threatens the fragile stability of your self-image. You begin to sabotage not only love, but opportunity, friendship, ambition, anything that might force you to grow beyond the borders of your pain. This is the quiet epidemic Dostoyevsky understood. The man who destroys what he loves is often not a villain in the traditional sense, but a captive of forces within himself. Forces he neither fully understands nor controls. And without intervention, without rebellion, the cycle will continue until there is nothing left to destroy. The question is, can such a man truly break free? And if so, how? Breaking the cycle does not begin with grand gestures or dramatic vows. It begins in a moment of brutal honesty, the kind that strips you bare in front of yourself. For the man who destroys what he loves, the rebellion is not against the world, but against the quiet tyrant inside his own mind. Dostoyevsky's characters who found redemption never did so by chasing perfection. They began by staring directly into their own ugliness. Jung would call this integrating the shadow, facing the parts of yourself you most want to hide. For the destroyer, this means confronting the fear that love will expose you, and accepting that exposure without flinching. The first radical act is to sit with vulnerability instead of fleeing from it. That means resisting the instinct to control, to test, or to preemptively wound. It means letting love breathe without smothering it with suspicion or possessiveness. In practical terms, it might be as simple and as difficult as telling the truth when you feel afraid, instead of masking fear with anger or distance. The second step is to dismantle the myth of control. Nietzsche warned against clinging to illusions of dominance over life's uncertainties. Love will always carry the risk of loss. The rebellion here is to embrace that risk as the price of authenticity. Instead of seeking to own love, you choose to participate in it fully, knowing it could end. This transforms love from a fragile possession into a living, evolving force. Then comes the counterintuitive leap, redefining strength. Strength is not the ability to remain untouched. It is the ability to remain open despite the inevitability of pain. Schopenhauer might scoff at this, but Viktor Frankl would agree. Meaning is forged not in the avoidance of suffering, but in how you face it. To make this practical, imagine applying the same discipline to relationships that you would to mastering a craft or building a business. You study your own triggers. You learn to notice when you are slipping into self-sabotage, and you interrupt the pattern, sometimes by pausing before you speak, sometimes by walking away before you act in anger. It also means seeking mirrors outside yourself. Dostoyevsky's redemption arcs often involved confession, not necessarily in a religious sense, but in the courage to speak your failures aloud to another human being. This could be therapy, or it could be a trusted friend who refuses to let you hide behind your excuses. And perhaps the most dangerous yet liberating act of all, choosing to love without guarantee. This is rebellion in its purest form, rejecting the transactional mindset that has been drilled into men, the belief that love is safe only when it can be secured, proven, or deserved. In truth, love is never deserved. It is a gift that can only be received with humility. History offers its examples. Think of Dostoyevsky himself, facing a mock execution before being sent to Siberia. Stripped of almost everything, he emerged with a sharpened sense of gratitude for life and a new compassion for human weakness. Or consider men like Nelson Mandela, who emerged from decades in prison without the bitterness that might have consumed a lesser soul. These men broke cycles not by avoiding pain, but by letting pain deepen their humanity. The rebellion, then, is not about becoming invulnerable. It is about becoming unafraid of vulnerability. It is the conscious choice to create rather than destroy, to hold rather than drop, to nurture rather than scorch. And yet, even in rebellion, there remains one truth you cannot escape. It is the deepest, most unsettling truth of all, and without it, even the strongest rebellion will collapse under its own illusions. Here's the truth most men spend their entire lives running from. The destruction of what you love is not truly about the other person, the dream, or the thing itself. It is about your relationship with existence itself. Dostoyevsky hinted at it through his most tormented characters, men who clung to self-inflicted ruin, not out of hatred for the world, but out of terror at the depth of their own longing. Because to love something deeply is to admit that your life is not complete on its own. It is to acknowledge a dependence on something outside yourself, something fragile, unpredictable, and utterly beyond your control. And here lies the paradox. The stronger the love, the greater the fear of losing it. The greater the fear, the stronger the temptation to end it on your own terms, so that you never have to watch it decay, slip away, or betray you. Destruction in this light is not an act of power, it is an act of surrender to fear. Carl Jung would say that what you fail to make conscious will control you as fate. If you do not confront the part of yourself that fears loss, it will whisper commands into your actions until you mistake sabotage for strength. You will destroy because you believe it is safer than hoping. And yet, when you see this clearly, the ultimate truth reveals itself. The act of holding on without guarantee is not weakness, it is the purest form of strength. Love is not about securing permanence. It is about showing up fully in the face of impermanence. It is choosing to give without knowing if you will receive, to plant without knowing if you will harvest. This is why Dostoyevsky's redeemed characters often emerged not triumphant, but humbled. They discovered that the true enemy was never the object of their love. It was the illusion that love could be controlled, owned, or protected from life's inevitable tides. When you destroy what you love, you are attempting to erase the unbearable truth that nothing in life is truly yours to keep. But the irony is that by accepting this truth, by embracing the transience of everything, you finally become free to love without the poison of fear. Nietzsche's concept of amor fati, the love of one's fate, captures this freedom. It is the radical act of not only accepting life as it is, but loving it, loss, risk, and all. In this mindset, destruction is no longer necessary, because you no longer fear the fragility of what you hold. You understand that its very fragility is what makes it beautiful. Once this truth takes root, the way you move through life changes. You stop clinging, you stop preemptively wounding, you stop crafting elaborate escapes from what scares you most. Instead, you allow yourself to be fully present, to watch the sunrise knowing it will fade, to hold someone's hand knowing it will one day let go, to invest yourself in a dream that could collapse tomorrow. This is not recklessness. It is the deepest courage a human being can practice, the willingness to love in a world where nothing lasts. And perhaps that is why Dostoyevsky's work still pierces the human heart. He understood that love's power does not come from its promise to last forever. It comes from its ability to awaken us, if only for a moment, to the rare and sacred experience of being fully alive, even in the face of inevitable loss. When you understand this, destruction loses its seduction. You no longer need to break what you love to protect yourself. You choose instead to protect it by cherishing it, knowing all along that the day may come when you must let it go. One day, everything you love will leave you, or you will leave it. This is not a curse, it is the architecture of life. The seasons change, the faces fade, the moments dissolve into memory. The man who destroys what he loves tries to outrun this truth, to write his own ending before time can. But in doing so, he robs himself of the very thing he sought to preserve, the raw, unfiltered beauty of love in its unbroken form. Dostoyevsky's work whispers across the centuries. The point is not to make love safe. The point is to live in it fully, knowing it is never safe at all. To step willingly into the fire, not because it cannot burn you, but because the warmth is worth the risk. So you stand at a choice. You can keep building walls, convincing yourself that if you control the ending, you control the pain. Or you can step beyond the fear into the strange, fierce courage of loving without guarantee. This is the quiet revolution, to hold without crushing, to trust without certainty, to give without the safety net of return. And maybe one day, long after you are gone, someone will remember that you were not the man who destroyed what he loved, but the man who finally learned how to protect it. The fire will still burn, but you will have chosen to warm your hands at it instead of extinguishing the flame. If this spoke to something deep in you, don't let it fade when the video ends. Subscribe and keep walking with us into the uncomfortable truths most people avoid. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and maybe, just maybe, you'll help them protect what they love before it's too late.